All right, hello, I am Nathan Hulinsky with the University of Minnesota Extension, and my contact information is on the front of the screen here. So email is the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can, in the handout that was emailed to everybody, my email was listed on there as well. This is our agenda for tonight. So we have some rental rate trends, we'll look at some crop budgets, we'll go through a whole bunch of FinBin data. We have land values that we'll talk about. And then we have some different worksheets that we'll walk through for both the landowner and the farmer. And then we'll talk about flexible rent and also some negotiation ideas. So the University of Minnesota website has a whole bunch of useful, helpful links. So this extension.umn.edu/managing-farm has a whole bunch of stuff. So on the front of the handout that was emailed, I put a shortened link of just z.umn/LR25. That'll go right to the land rental page on our extensions website. And this is what it looks like. So on that extension website, it'll highlight farmland rental rate trends. And if you click on it, it'll open up a table, as you can see in the bottom of the screen here, and it'll be alphabetical by county, what their last 3 years average land rental data is. So we try to make all the information very easy to find so everyone can be on the same page. We have two main data sources that we use for this, for rental rate information. And the first bit of information is collected by the Center for Farm Financial Management. And you can see the website on the screen here. They put together a county rental rate information database. And the database that they use is called FinBin. I'll highlight FinBin a little bit later on tonight, but it is farm specific data and it's very Minnesota heavy. So we're lucky in Minnesota, we have a lot of data from FinBin that we can use. And in the handout that I emailed to everybody that was registered for this call, it's statewide data. So it's the whole state of Minnesota is listed. And we can see on the screen here, again, I'm highlighting South Central Minnesota for this. So I'll just pick on Blue Earth County. We can see in 2021, the average per acre per year payment was $234. A pretty big jump into 2022 to $260. A big jump again into 2023 to $279. And then into 2024, kind of a big drop from 23 into 2024. And we can see the 2024 data is broken down from average, which is simply the average, the median, which is the number in the middle, high to low. The 10th percentile is the low end of the range, so kind of the bottom 10% of land rent for the county. And then the 90th percentile is just simply the top 10% of land rents in that county. So it's not exactly the high to low, but it's kind of a high and low range of what we see in the county. And you can see they're all broken down on the screen. And like I mentioned in the handout, we have the whole state of Minnesota. But a very similar trend, how we increased from 21 into 2022, into 2023, and then into 2024, a decrease. And I expect to see a decrease in trend line into 2025 and 2027, just where commodity prices are. And I'll highlight all of this, in the next hour. And then on the far right of the screen is the USDA data. So it's the same, it's the for 2024 and 2025, but it's just a different data source. That's from USDA. NASS is just the National Agricultural Statistics Service. That's the statistical branch of the USDA. So it's where they collect their data. It's okay, buddy. And you can see, unfortunately, not every single county has data every single year. So like Blue Earth County in 2024 didn't have enough data to report. Whereas in 2025, they published the average per acre land rent at $266. Very similar to our FinBin database from 2024. Typically, the numbers are very similar year to year. Like if we look at LeSueur County, they have the average at 244 in Finbin in 2024 and in USDA 250. So they're typically very close to each other, which I think highlights that the data is just reliable and realistic, accurate data. Excuse me. So this is a breakdown across the state of Minnesota. We can see from 2020 into 2024, over that 5-year period, we actually saw about a 20% increase. Not year over year, but just as a total. So we can see Southwest Minnesota, 21% increase, Southeast 24, Southwest 22, the state as a whole, 21% increase. And then we can see from 23 into 2024, just the 1-year trend, we had a small reduction. So in South Central Minnesota, about a 2.5% decrease. Southwest Minnesota, a little higher decrease. The state as a whole dropped right about 1% from 2023 into 2024. So again, most of that increase from the 2020 through the 2024 time period was early in that period from 2020 into 21, into 22, into 23. And then in 24, overall, we did see a reduction. So that's kind of the trends we've been seeing. And this is highlighting both irrigated and pasture data. We don't have as much data for irrigated specific and also for pasture. This is all USDA data. We can see Blue Earth, there's no irrigated data. Brown County, there's a decent bit of data in the data set. And then pasture rent there, not a ton for the south central part of the state. Other parts of the state have a lot more data in this specific irrigated and pasture rental figures. The way that USDA does publish their pasture rent data, it is on a per acre basis. A lot of times when farmers rent pasture, it's on a per animal basis. So sometimes there's a little bit of discrepancy just with how the number is portrayed. I have more pasture rent data available. If you have more questions, feel free to contact me. The next thing we'll look at here is crop budgets for 2026. I put these budgets together using Finbin data, and this is corn. So we can see the 5-year average yield right around 200 bushel corn for south central Minnesota. The 5-year average price, right, just over $5. And we can see the list of expenses. I won't go through every single line item in detail, but I will highlight the bottom, the net income number there in the blue line. Over the 5-year average, farmers in south central Minnesota profited $166 per acre. So that's some pretty strong profits over the last few years. The bulk of those profits came in 2021 and 2022, but on a 5-year average, still a pretty good number. We can see that historically that number is probably around the $50 range, $50 profit per acre. Into 2024, profits weren't near as profitable. They weren't near as high. We can see the net income in 2024 on corn ground was a negative $67 an acre, where farmers were losing $67 every acre. My projected budget into 2026 is similar there, with the net income actually negative there, a loss of $83 per acre. So if you have farmers approaching you as landowners about, hey, I'm not profitable and I want to decrease in my land rental rate, this is the reason why. Their net income is unfortunately negative on a per acre basis here. And at the top of the screen, we have the cost of production. So that's the cost of production to produce 1 bushel of corn. We can see in 2020 it was $3.37. So that's a profitable level. We jumped 70 cents into 21. We jumped another 80 cents into 2022, and then jumped 20 cents again into 23 and stayed flat into 2024. From 2020 into 2024, we jumped $1.70 on a per bushel basis on corn to produce 1 bushel. So pretty remarkable increases in expenses for the farm. Same budget template here on soybeans. I'll highlight the cost of production at the top, $7.58 in 2020, very profitable level in today's market. However, into 2021, it jumped a good $1.50. It jumped another $1.50 per bushel into 2022, another dollar in 2023, finally a reduction there about 70 cents into 2024. But still, from 2020 into 2024, that's $3.50 increase per bushel to grow 1 bushel of soybeans. So pretty tremendous increases in expenses. We can see the 5-year average yield just under 60 bushels. I have a projection next year at around 55. We can see price averaging $12 on average over the last 5 years. Next year, I got $10. We can see the same list of expenses broken down here. Net income on the bottom. Over the last 5 years, farms have averaged just over $100 per acre profit. Again, not a horrible number. Last year in 2024, farmers lost on average about 25 bushels per acre, or $25 per acre, so not great. My projected budget into 2026 is about identical there, a loss of about $27 per acre. So again, both corn and soybeans, my budgets for next year are negative, unfortunately. And this is just the median net farm income for crop farms, Minnesota specific, in the Finbin database over the last 20 years. We can see starting in 2007 through 2012, we had pretty strong farm incomes, right? And we can see 2012 was above $300,000 income on the median. So ridiculously high income for that 1 year period. It crashed in 2013 all the way through 2019. The farm income was below $50,000. So that's below, the American average family income of, the American average is probably close to $70,000. Here it's only $50,000. Starting in 2020, farm income started to increase on the crop side. 21 and 2022, tremendous income, as I've been alluding to here. In 2022, our income on the farm was above $250,000. So very strong incomes. Unfortunately for the farmer, they dropped off in a hurry. 2023 farm income was right around $50,000. And then into 2024, a whopping $2,400 of income. So not a lot of income. We're talking $200 a month in 2024. That's the lowest we've have on record here for the last 20 years. So the farm incomes have been tough last year and into 2025 and 26. It's not looking very rosy either. This is a breakdown of the black line price received. So that's what farmers are selling it for. The blue line is their cost of production. So you can see again, it matches up very easy or very closely with the previous graph from 2008 through 2012. Higher incomes, the black line was above that blue line from 2013 through 2020. Again, very limited incomes. And then 21 and 22, again, a large gap between the black and blue lines and strong incomes. Same graph on soybeans, and again, same story. 2007 through 2012, strong incomes. 2014 through 2020, no income. On the soybean side, wasn't as profitable in that 2021 and 22 period, but again, 23 and 24, very limited profits on the farm. This is a graph on Minnesota price receives, and it just happens that 2023 was higher than any price received by the farmer than anything in 2024 or so far in 2025. We can see the red line in the middle is 2024, and then the yellow line is 2025, and prices have not increased at all in the last year and a half. We're all below what we saw in 2023. This is the same table, same graph, just on soybeans, and you can see that dark red line is 23. 2024, all the prices for every single month are below what we saw in 23. And the yellow line as well. Everything in 2025 has been sold for less than either 2023 or 2024. So it's a little tough on the farm here this last year. This is the same data, just going back a little bit further. And again, you can see 2015 through 2020, both on corn at the bottom and soybeans at the top. right at selling at cost of production. A big run up of prices in late 2020 through kind of mid 2023, and then prices declined pretty rapidly kind of to where we're at today. I will highlight most farmers have utilized crop insurance. In the Midwest, it's about 90 to 95% of acres on corn and soybeans have crop insurance. So it's not 100%, but it's about 9 out of 10 acres do have crop insurance on them. And the way crop insurance pays out is that it uses a spring price and a fall price that's set nationally. It's the same for every farmer in the country. The spring price in 2025 on corn was 470, the fall price 422. Crop insurance pays out on the higher of these two prices. So if farmers were to get an indemnity check, certain parts of Minnesota here in 2025 did have some excess rain issues and yields were below average, which may trigger some crop insurance payments. But overall in the state of Minnesota, yields were average to above average. On the soybean side of things, the spring price was 10.54, fall price of 10.35. Again, it pays out on the higher of the two. We can see in the graph on the table here that certain years the fall price is higher, some years the spring price is higher. Just to highlight that. Another safety belt or a safety mechanism that farmers utilize is the federal farm bill. So the farm bill has two major components, PLC or ARC, and farmers get to choose between one or the other, and whatever one they chose, they're kind of locked in for that year. PLC paid out zero for crop year 2024. This is for crop year 2024 on ARC payments, and these payments will be issued in the next week or two. So these are very new news that are on the slide here. And you can see canola payments. There's a few kind of scattered around western Minnesota. A few oats payments in Minnesota. They're kind of all over the state, from Brown County to Norman County, north and south. A few sunflower seed payments kind of all in northwest Minnesota. And we can see wheat payments. There's quite a few wheat payments scattered across the state. Like we can pick on Watawan County has a $25 wheat payment. We can also pick on Cottonwood County has an $18 wheat payment. Dodge County a $26 wheat payment. These do pay out on base acres, not on planted acres, but there's quite a few counties with the payment. And then corn and soybeans are our two most common grown crops in Minnesota. These are the corn payments, and they're pretty substantial. If we want to pick on Dakota County, their non-irrigated corn payments, $53 per acre. Brown County is $96 per acre, so pretty substantial payment. A lot of times this is the maximum payment for a lot of these counties. We have a few payments that are actually approaching $100 per acre, like Nicollet County, Le Sueur County. Those are above $100 per acre. Same with Waseca and Watawan County. Some substantial payments will be paid out, and these payments are through the federal government, through USDA, and they are paid to the farmer and not the landowner. From the USDA's perspective, the farmer is the one taking the risk, growing and harvesting, selling the crop, not the landowner. This is the same payments for soybeans. And again, there's some substantial payments across Minnesota. Blue Earth County, both for irrigated and non-irrigated, is right around $70 per acre. A few other counties, Dodge County, $27 per acre. Lincoln County, a small payment at $3. Sibley County, $65 an acre. Steele County, $70 per acre. Some of these counties are pretty large on both corn and soybeans. This is a breakdown. This is from the University of Illinois. Their expected payments on corn. And you can see central and south central Minnesota is kind of the largest pocket of that darker shaded counties of higher payments. Pretty much in the entire Midwest, Minnesota has the most payments on corn. Same story on soybeans here, where kind of that, southern and south central Minnesota, the highest concentration of some of those dark green counties, which are higher payments. Iowa, not a lot of payments. Illinois, not a lot. Kentucky, Tennessee, a little higher payments, but we grow more soybeans in Minnesota than they do in that part of the country. And then current prices. This is out of just Janesville energy plant. I have no affiliation with them. This I could screenshot their data easily. Their cash price today was 413. January actually dropped a few cents, 410. It's 410 corn all the way through March into April and May, 413, 416. So a little over $4 corn is kind of all we're seeing. Um, for current cash prices. We have a question in the chat box here about, as a landowner, can you see what those farmer payments are? And I do not know a very easy way to do that. Potentially it is public information because it's public dollars, but I don't know if you go to the USDA website, I can tell you the county payment, but I can't tell you how much Farmer Bob got in Brown County. I don't know how to find that. Um, so kind of a yes and no answer to your question there, but hopefully that was helpful. This is just a CHS plant out of Mankato, just highlighting soybeans. I believe this is their crushing facility, so it's a little higher payments than some other facilities across the state, but we have about 1080 to $11 soybeans throughout the next 6 to 10 months. So that's current cash prices. And I also like to highlight, as a landowner, if you are renting farmland to a beginning farmer, and to be considered a beginning farmer, it is 10 years less of farm income. So it has no age component. You can be 65 and a beginning farmer. Um, if you're a beginning farmer that you're renting to wants to, there's some paperwork required. It's fairly easy to fill out, but you can see on the cash lease there, it's 10% of the rental income. So if you're renting out for $200 per acre, you can get $20 per acre as a Minnesota tax credit. So you can get a higher rebate when you file your Minnesota taxes. So it's a pretty good system. You can see the application due dates on the screen here have all since expired. This has been renewed and will start again the first of the year. And the money that's in this program is on a first come, first served basis. So if you are working with the beginning farmer, probably don't fill out the information come September. Fill that out towards the beginning of the year to take advantage of the tax credits that the Department of Agriculture has. So I'm going to highlight some other Finbin data. I've been talking about it already here this afternoon. This is what Finbin website looks like. It's just a screenshot of what's going on here. When I created those budgets from this morning, it was a crop summary report in the top there in green. You can also do a benchmark report. That's the red section there. This is what a benchmark report can look like. I know there's a lot going on, but I think it's helpful to break down farmers' information here in 10% buckets. So 10% is like the bottom 10%, and then 100%, that's the top 10%, so the higher performers. So if we look at yield, this particular report is the whole state of Minnesota. You can focus on one county. It's county level data. So you can do 1, 2, 3, 4 counties if that's what you want to do. The yield per acre in Minnesota, the bottom end was 115, the top end at 232. So that's the yield variation within the state of Minnesota. You can see all these different expenses. There's a wide variation in expenses per acre from high to low in this graph. So I think it's important for farmers to realize, hey, am I above average or below average? This graph here, the top line is net return, so that's profit by the farm. The bottom 10% of corn farmers lost $330 per acre. That's a humongous number. The top 10% made $220 per acre. So again, we have this wide variation, $550 from the top 10% to the bottom 10% in terms of net profit per acre. So again, I think it's important for farmers to say, hey, am I making money? Am I above average or am I below average? I think it's a good starting point. And you can do this on a very more localized county level. This is county yield. For a corn yield specific to South Central Minnesota, you can see they average right around 200 bushel corn pretty consistently. 2024 was a little below average, about 170. This is soybean yield right around 60 bushels. We can see in 24, slightly below average, a little closer to 50 bushels per acre. This slide is a breakdown of all of the different inputs. So land rent in green is that top line. So land rent is the most expensive input per acre dollar amount that farmers spend. The top red line, the bright one, that is fertilizer. Fertilizer got quite a bit more expensive in 2022 and 2023. And then that brown line is machinery. So machinery, land rent, and fertilizer are the most expensive inputs on corn. Seed expense, chemicals, and crop insurance are at the bottom. This is the same graph on soybeans, and very clearly that the green line of land rent is the most expensive input. The next one there, again, machinery, and at the bottom, it's kind of a mix between seed, fertilizer, chemicals, and crop insurance. But very clearly, land rent is the most expensive input on soybeans, followed by machinery. The next thing we'll highlight here is land values. So the University of Minnesota does collect land sale data, and it's landeconomics.umn.edu. It's broken down on a township level. So you can look at, Blue Earth Township and Blue Earth County, or whatever their township names are. It's broken down on a township level. And this is a list. So the screenshot here is specific to South Central Minnesota. In the handout that I emailed to everybody, it is the entire state of Minnesota. So we try to make the data very easy to find for everybody. And we can see in 2024, Blue Earth County had 14 land sales. Watawan County had 13 land sales. And these are farmland specific, 20 acres or more in the parcel. So if it was a 10-acre parcel, it's not included. And we also try to weed out the arm's length, or only to be arm's length transactions. So if father is buying or selling to his son, that's not included because a lot of times those are not accurate market values. A lot of family transactions are below market value. But Blue Earth County, the average sale price was $9,900 an acre. Minimum from $4,600 to maximum to $14,500 per acre. So pretty wide variation from min to max. We look at Brown County, 15 land sales, average sale price 12 grand, minimum 6,300, maximum 16,200. So we got about a $10,000 difference high to low. In Freeborn County, we got about a $13,000 high to low difference between the minimum and maximum per acre. So wide variation. And we can see we have the 2023 average sale price listed there. Most counties saw an increase from 2023 into 2024. Not every single county did. Like if we pick on Nicollet County, that actually saw a decrease per acre of about $1,600, where most counties did see an increase. Brown County was about a $1,700 per acre increase from 2023 into 2024. So again, you can look at the various counties. And I do want to highlight that landeconomics.umn.edu website is updated annually in the springtime. This Minnesota Electronic Certificate of Real Estate Value, this is updated roughly monthly. It's the same data set that we use through the other university website. This is just the Minnesota information. It's updated more frequently than the university one, and you can get to the same information. So you can select what county, what township, and then that property use. So you can do like houses, you can do farmland, you can break it down a few different ways and look at a different sales days. So again, another data set for land sales. And then I have questions quite frequently on crop productivity index. So the CPI index is just on a scale of 0 to 100 on how productive the soil is. So typically the higher the number, the higher the real estate value, the higher the sales point, and also the higher the land rent. If it's below 50, typically it's not really farmland. It's going to be like timberland, pasture land, or like a swamp type of deal. And you can see, unfamiliar to probably no one on the call, kind of south central Minnesota is probably the darkest green pocket on the whole state of Minnesota. The more north and east you get, it's just less productive soils. A lot of reasons for the why of that. But if you go to this website, you can zoom in at your parcel and it'll tell you what the CPI index is. So it can be helpful to determine if your farm productivity is above or below average. So it can be a helpful link for people to utilize. And it's a University of Minnesota resource. So we know it's trustworthy kind of with that component. It's not some random, Joe Blow AI tool that created it. It's a accredited resource. This is USDA farmland values. So this is the entire nation on an average, but I think the trend line increase in real estate values is pretty remarkable. Back in 1950, farmland on average, inflation adjusted, was about $750. We had a slow increase, and then in the late mid 70s, we had a big spike. Early, and then the early 80s, we had a big decrease in land values, and then a very slow increase in land values up until kind of the mid 2000s, and then starting in roughly 2005, 6, a big run up in prices all the way through like 2013, 2014. Then a slight decrease, through 2020, and then the last 5 years have been pretty fast-paced increase as well. This is the same data set here, but it's the state average for each state across the union. I think the state average is really hard to interpret as anything, but the percent increase from 2024 into 2025 is pretty remarkable. In Minnesota, we increased 7%. That's amongst the highest in the entire nation. That's above the national average. Michigan was about 8.2%, but for the whole Midwest, Minnesota was the second highest increase in land values. I don't really know why. We've had some very strong increases in our land values in Minnesota. This is the same data just broken down in a table, and I'll highlight Minnesota. Back in 2021, farmland was worth $5,030. We fast forward to 2025, that same parcel of farmland is worth $7,000. So in the last 5 years, we've jumped $2,000 per acre. So that's like a 40% increase over the last 5 years. So a pretty remarkable increase just in the last 5 years on farmland. And I do want to highlight people when we are looking at farmland negotiations and farmland rental rates using realistic county actual production histories. So using realistic yields, it's very easy to say, oh, I get 220 bushel corn. Well, maybe on one parcel or one part of a parcel, but the farm average, the county average might be less than that. We can see this is USDA data in Blue Earth County, 198 bushels per acre is the 5-year average on corn. Brown County about the same. Faribault County a little bit higher. Steele County, you can see the variation across south central Minnesota. And then we jump over to soybeans on the right-hand side of the screen. 60 bushels is pretty tough to get above, right? In Blue Earth County, 59.5. The only county in this entire region that is over 60 bushels on average is Faribault. That's the only county. So just using realistic yields, and I always saying that we get 220 bushel corn and 65 bushel beans is not realistic for, the last 5-year average. So just utilizing realistic yields is important. And then we do want to, we have some worksheets that I think are helpful. The first one here is from the landowner's point of view. And we can see it's pretty simple. First line there, row A, farm size. How many acres are we renting out? So if you own 180 acres, but only 156 is tillable, use the 156 number, not the total 180. So 156. And then what's that value per acre? Again, we just showed land sales in south central Minnesota are highly variable. There's some big discrepancies or big differences high to low, but what's a realistic value for your county or your individual parcel? And then row C, multiply the two together, right? What's your total farm value? In this example, we got $1 million. What's your desired rate of return on investment? As a landowner, as an asset owner, you should be able to get some form of rate of return. Typically, in Midwest agriculture, uh, farmland is about a 2 to 2.5% rate of return. That's historically where we've been the last 10 years, where we're not seeing 3, 4, 5% rates of return. Typically on farmland, that's well above average. Average again is about 2 to 2.5. On that $1 million, that's $25,000. Real estate taxes. Those are highly variable across the state, depending on your school district, your township, your county, whatever they're based on counties' budgets a lot of times here. And in South Central Minnesota, that may be pushing $50 an acre. I'm more familiar with central and northern Minnesota, where it's kind of $20 to $30 per acre on farmland. But in southern Minnesota, it might be a little bit higher. But knowing what your real estate taxes are important. Counties should have sent out just in the last week or two their assessed values for 2026 that show your estimated taxes moving forward. On that same slip of paper, it will tell you what the county thinks your ground is worth. That's an excellent starting point for what the value is of your farm. Landowners may have some liability insurance or some other cash costs, like fixing a gate, a fence, or a driveway approach, every once in a while, where it's not necessarily happening every year. Row H, you sum up all of your revenue, so your rate of return and real estate taxes, divide by how many acres. In this example here, we get $213 per acre. So again, I think this is a good starting point for landowners to come in at where they would like to be with land rent. Just another example in the same worksheet showing the difference here with a different value on the farmland. So the numbers do change. The next two worksheets we have are from the farmer's perspective. And the first one here is looking at what a farmer can spend on land rent. And here we have how many acres of both, different crops. We have corn and soybeans, 100 acres each in this example. What is your expected yield and your expected price? What is your expected expenses, right? These on a per acre basis. How much are we spending on seed, fertilizer, chemicals? What is your crop marketing expense? What is your hired labor expense? Adding up all these things is important for farmers to capture all of their expenses. The next line here is overhead expenses, where we are talking about utilities, right? Farms have to pay the electric bill every month. What is the interest expense? If you have loans, you have to pay the bank back. And what about depreciation? And then operator labor management, that's the farmer income. We typically average about a $50 per acre income for the farmer. At the bottom of the worksheet, you sum up your total expenses, take away your expected price or your total income minus expenses, and you can get how much is available for the farmer to spend on land rent. So again, in this example, it's $106 per acre. Anything more than that the farmer would spend eats into their profits. Anything less than that is more profits into the farmer's hands. This fairrent.umn.edu website is more or less that same worksheet, just as an online platform where you can create multiple accounts at one time. And through this website, at the end of it, it'll publish, with a 10% increase in corn price, what does that do to your land rental price? Or a 10% increase in your seed expense, how that impacts your final dollar. We have a question here about how much farmland in Minnesota is rented based on tillable acres versus total acres. I don't 100% know that answer. I don't quite understand what you're asking there, Eric. Most farmers on average own 1/3 of their acres. And then the farmer on average in Minnesota rent about 2/3 of their acres. So, the average crop farm in Minnesota, I'll just say 1,000 acres. On average, farmers are owning about 350 acres and then renting out the remaining about 650 acres In the state of Minnesota, we do farm right at 50% of our acres. So I think Minnesota is right around 50 million acres. And in Minnesota, we farm about 25 million acres in Minnesota. So typically in these land rental agreements, farmers pay out on tillable acres, not on owned total acres. So like if they own 180 acres and only a 120 is tillable, the farmer is paying out on 120 tillable acres, not on the 100 owned acres or the 180 owned acres. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, Eric. It's typically um, paid out on tillable only, not including those, waterways or driveways or whatever else is incorporated into the farmland. This next worksheet that is geared towards farmers that's in the handout here is the acceptable price. So it's also the cost of production or the break-even point. So they all mean the same thing. So here we have how many acres, corn and soybeans. So we got 500 acres of each in this example. What is your expected yield, your expected price? Same list of expenses from that previous worksheet where what is the farmer spending on seed, fertilizer, chemicals per acre for their different crops? What about overhead expenses where we're talking about, again, utilities, depreciation, and interest, right? How much is the farm spending on these categories? And then family living. The whole point of farming is to, make enough money to support the family. We have in this example, the family needs $90,000 to sustain itself, and that 60% of that is coming from the farm. So the farm needs to make $54,000 to support the family's, health insurance and mortgage and groceries and all those different things. Um, the average family living cost is about $60 to $70 per acre. So again, it's not nothing. The farm does need to maintain some profits to support the family. And then at the bottom of the worksheet, you add up your total expenses, take away or your total income, you take away from your expenses, and then you can get based on your expected yield, your cost of production. So here we got $5 corn and $13 soybeans. Hopefully your individual farm is a little lower than that. This website here, this crop cost at UMN, is pretty much that same worksheet, just on a online template. Again, the University of Minnesota has created these websites in order to make it easier for farmers to calculate what their cost of production is. So crop cost is a pretty useful tool to help determine what your cost of production is. Switching gears here, flexible lease agreements. So most often in the renting world, the farmer pays the landowner, I'll say $200 per acre for easy math. Maybe the farmer does $100 per acre in the spring, $100 per acre in the fall, $200 per acre. The final rental amount is known up front. The flexible lease agreement is slightly different, where the final rental amount per acre is dependent on how well that year went. So either on price or yield or price times yield. There's a few various things that we can flex this on, but the final agreement would be unknown. So in my example, the farmer will pay $100 in the springtime, but that final fall payment will maybe go down to $180 per acre, or excuse me, $80 per acre for a total of $180 per acre. And maybe it'll jump up that they'll pay $120, $130 in the fall. So that total payment to the landowner is $20 to $30 above or below, right? There's some flexibility in it. You can do it again on gross revenue. You can just do base rent plus a bonus and say, hey, I'm going to give you $200 every year. If things look really good, I can give you an extra 5-10%, right? There's a few different ways to do this. In my conversations with both farmers and landowners, they struggle to determine what price point to use for commodities and also what the final exact extra payment should be. They find it slightly challenging to find the proper computation. And that can be the case. And if it's too complicated, just use the cash rent lease. I think the last few years these have been attempted, and landowners find that knowing 100% of their income up front is just easier, and just having the straight cash rental agreement is simpler. But flex rent can be a good tool. I can talk more about it if there's questions. Um, Most of the leases that I have conversation with the farmers and landowners are not flex lease, but definitely some of them are. Here's some examples for percent of gross revenue. Historically, about 29% of corn gross revenue goes towards land rents, a little bit higher on soybeans, about 39%. So at 150 bushel yield at 350 corn, that's $152 per acre land rent. On soybeans, $9 beans at 39% gross revenue at 40 bushels. That's $140 per acre land rent. These numbers might be a little bit lower, the total dollar amounts per acre for South Central Minnesota, but the math will fluctuate if you have higher yields incorporated into this formula. So it's one idea for flex rent. So a couple other landowner considerations. A landowner can take a first lien position in crops growing on rented land. So you have to take a lien out on the unpaid amount of land rent. That lien would put the landowner in first position, potentially second position if a bank has first position on an operating loan with that farmer already. What is a lien? A lien is a obligation that the lien holder has to get paid back. Like if I buy a car through a bank and take out a loan, the bank will have a lien on the title to the car. So if I don't make my payments, the bank will come and repossess the car, and that lien gives them the authority to do so. So in this circumstance, if the farmer does not pay you for land rent, this lien will legally mandate them that you have the obligation to get paid. I've had landowners tell me they file this UCC1 financing statement annually to make sure that they get paid. Nothing wrong with that. There's a small fee to it. It's like $20 to $40 to file it. So it's not a huge expense. You do need to file this lien within 30 days of the crops beginning to grow. And I will highlight, if you are working with a farmer and they are struggling to pay you back, it may be time as a landowner to look at getting a new farmer to come in and rent your ground to pay you in a more timely fashion. So just kind of another thought process on that. I do recommend putting a lease into writing just for legal and clarity reasons. Both for the landlord and the renter understand the details. All agreements can be outlined and reviewed. It's really tough to review a verbal agreement. It's also a good guide for heirs. I get phone calls every year from widows and children who inherited farmland from the parents and say, I have no idea what's going on. Dad took care of this the last 20 years. What should I be getting for land? So this, writing it down can be helpful for down the road. It should be signed and dated by both parties. Some things to include: name, address of both the landowner and the farmer, legal description of the land. Every county has a legal description format. Beginning and end date. How long is this lease? What's the rent detail? What's the rent amount? Is it $200 per acre, 50% April 1st, 50% November 1st? What's the payment type? Cash, check, half a cow, right? There's different ways to make this work. And what happens if the payment is late? Is there a penalty? If the payment's late, does that terminate the lease? It's a lot easier to have this discussion up front than after the fact when the payment's late and now what's going to happen. Termination details. What's the end date? Does the landowner need to tell the farmer September 1st if that farmer gets the field in the springtime or not? Is there a notice requirement where September 1st, the farmer has to know, otherwise they get that in the springtime. Reimbursement consideration for fall applied fertilizer or tillage, with the farmer anticipating them farming that in the springtime, but then the landowner said, hey, I got someone else to come in. Amendments and disputes. What happens if you want to change something down the road? Most leases are relatively short in the farming world, where they're 1, 2, 3 years long. Um, it's very common that the farmer has first right of refusal, or they are the first ones to renegotiate that lease for the next year. But most leases are relatively short. Insurance, who insures the property? A lot of times landowners have some form of liability coverage, and then crop insurance. Typically, the farmer does that, and the landowner really has no thought process to crop insurance. Other things, landowners' rights. What about ability to enter the property? And this is primarily looking at hunting rights and like who can enter that property at what dates. And if the farmer or if the landowner wants to farm that parcel of ground, in the fall time, and they don't want the farmer out there doing tillage or harvesting, the farmer, for the most part, are well willing to abide by those clauses. They just need to know. Federal Farm Bill, is it enrolled? Some landowners care. Some landowners want to know what the farmer is getting for Farm Bill payments. You can ask the farmer. I know that if a landowner asks the USDA what Farmer Bob got for a payment, they will not answer. They'll say that's private information. But you can ask the farmer. Management participation. Does the landowner want to be participating in management? Do they want to be considered a farmer for tax reasons? For certain estate planning purposes, that it might be beneficial. Is there any intent for partnership? Again, we need to have these things known up front. It's really tough to partner after the fact. Farming practices, is there any preferred practices like no-till or, strip till or organic? Certain farmers are use no-till and it works well. Not every farmer it works as well with. And with no-till, there's new equipment or different equipment required, and the farmer may not want to buy new equipment just to farm your field. So we just need to have this conversation up front to see where we're at. And then improvements. Can the farmer improve the property? So this is typically tiling or irrigation. If a farmer's going to tile a field, they are going to want a long-term lease to capture that expense. If the landowner is going to tile the field, they may want increased land rent to compensate for their costs. So kind of the different sides of that. And then property map, I think it's important just to highlight a map of where the proper entrances are and just borders of the property. So these are some things to consider when drafting your lease. And we have some sample resources here. aglease101.org does have some sample leases on it. They can be kind of simple, but it's a good starting point for some of the verbiage to include. And then Iowa State does also have some lease examples on their website, and that's the website there to get to it. Again, they can be a good starting point. Leases do not need to be drafted by a lawyer. Sometimes that just makes it more confusing than it needs to be. But if you want it to be reviewed by a lawyer, that's completely up to you. I would say it's not required, but can be a good option for peace of mind if that's what you're thinking. We're kind of wrapping up here. We got about 10 minutes left. Steps to negotiation. Start with solid research. And I would argue everyone on the call here today is doing the solid research. Everybody, I'm providing a lot of the county average numbers, county average yields and prices that I think are required for this discussion to make sure that we're in the ballpark for what we're seeing in the region. As a landowner, you can ask for $500 per acre land rent, but that might be pretty outrageous. So start with solid research, clarify your goals. I would argue as a landowner, if you always want top dollar for land rent, and if your other goal is you want long-term soil health and long-term soil growth, those can be conflicting goals. So keep that in mind. Having, the same family farm your ground for 20, 30 years at a time that always takes care of it and maintains it properly, that is worth something as well, even if you don't always see top dollar every single year. Communicate clearly. Make offers thoughtfully, showcase value, be flexible. This is a compromise. This is a negotiation. Put it in writing. Review the lease. Again, legal if desired, foster a strong relationship. Most farmers want to rent your farmland for the long term, where they don't want to be bouncing around, getting new parcels every single year to maintain their farm size. And for most landowners, they don't want to be getting a new farmer every year either. They want to be working with one farmer and having this a long-term relationship where they say, hey, you pay me fairly, you pay me on time. That's worth a lot versus chasing down the next farmer to get paid at the end of the year. And then review and adapt. From the farmer's point of view here, we just want to highlight that they are getting their direct expenses covered. And then from a farmer, most farmers rent more than one parcel. What's their land quality versus rental rates, uh, price points on the different parcels that they're renting? Are there high quality ground, higher rental rates, or are there low quality ground that they're renting higher rental rates, right? Maybe that's a way that we can renegotiate some of these contracts. What's the financial position of the farm, right? Some farms are just better off than others for various reasons. And then other income generating possibilities. There's other things that farms can do to increase revenue as well. From the landowner's point of view, we want to make sure that their costs are being covered and their financial needs are being met. A lot of landowners are retirees and use this as retirement income. We want to make sure that the farmer's not taking advantage of these landowners and paying below market land rent, just to be not fair. It's not appropriate to that landowner. We want to make sure that they're being treated fairly. What's the strength of that tenant relationship? Have they been renting to the same farmer for the last 20 years and it's always gone well? That's worth a lot as well, for the landowner's point of view. What's the quality of the agronomic care? Are they always, appropriately fertilizing the ground and appropriately spraying pesticides on the ground and they're doing a good job farming it? Or is it always the last to get planted, the last to get harvested, the last to get sprayed, and it's not always great, right? Maybe then it's time to look at getting a new farmer to come in and do a better job. And then the lease options, right? Long term versus short term. Maybe you want to do 1 year leases. Maybe you want to do a 10-year lease. There's different ways to adjust the rental agreement besides simply dollar amounts per acre, right? Adding clauses to the agreement where we can say, hey, you can say, I want the farmer to mow my ditches in the summertime. I want the farmer to fix the property fence. I want the farmer to plow snow in the wintertime with their loader tractor, right? It's so much quicker than me with the snowblower doing it. So there's other things that we can bring into this conversation that can be beneficial to both sides. And then that flexible lease component can be a good option. I do want to highlight negotiation skills are important here. Win-win is the ideal outcome, right? Both sides of the farmer and the landowner want this probably to be a long-term agreement so that they can find, so they both want to find steps moving forward to make this, a realistic approach, and we want both people happy. Write it down, prepare, engage, and review. I think that's just important to make sure everyone's on the same page. I do want to insist on using accurate data. I've highlighted the USDA NASS data. I've highlighted this FinBin database that's this realistic, accurate data that we can trust. Don't be using this coffee shop talk where you don't exactly know where their data come from. It's very easy to exaggerate numbers, right? I've heard farmers say, hey, I averaged, 250 bushels on corn. Well, maybe on one parcel or something, but the farm average probably not that high. So just using accurate data is important. These are the references that I've talked about over the last hour. Again, the University of Minnesota website has all of this information on it. The FinBin database has all that county level data that's easy to find. The USDA data, the farmland sales, both the university version and the state version, the crop productivity index map, the cost of production tool, the fair rent tool, and then those lease examples to help everyone get started writing down their leases. I think these are great points. These are all free resources for everyone to kind of continue the research on where this rental rate negotiation will go. That's all the slides I have for everybody tonight. I want to thank you for joining. My email and phone number on the screen here for any future questions. Thank you for listening.